Hey, welcome to Vet Connect, a place where we talk about bridging the understanding between civilian and military worlds, shedding a little light on present veterans issues currently out in the community, and celebrating veterans' contributions in and out of service. Today on Vet Connect, we are joined by none other than Mr. Lieutenant Colonel retired Paul Tulin. He joined the Army in 1986 as a private in the Army National Guard. He's been a Green Beret since 1999. He served with the 3rd and 5th Special Forces groups in leadership positions from detachment commander, which that's when I knew him, battalion, all the way up to battalion command. He served as the director of Special Forces training, as the director of operations for the 1st Special Forces Command, and finished his long and distinguishing career as the deputy commander of 1st Special Warfare Training Group at Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty, North Carolina, responsible for the assessment, selection, and training of all U.S. Army Green Berets. Paul, welcome to Vet Connect. How you doing today, brother?
Can you hear me okay?
You bet, loud and clear. Not like when
Yeah,
you're a
that's an
detachment commander.
yeah, that was an incredibly detailed way to describe the life of a of a mid-level government servant who was incapable of doing anything else for 36 years. I appreciate that. It made me sound like, like something. I tell people all the time, when I'm talking about my career, I was like, yeah, I was like, oh yeah, I was a Green Beret for 25 years, and that just means that I used to be cool, but now just a box of worn out parts. So, yeah, what's up, man? You look great.
Good, you too, man. You too. Been a long time. How's everything been going on your end?
Oh, good. Where are you at? Are you still in North Carolina?
Still down. I'm down in San Antonio. I retired in 17, actually. It was one of those.
God, did you retire in 17? Oh man,
I know,
time
dude.
flies, right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and
Yeah.
we do each other a little bit on.
Yeah, it's an uncharacteristically nice day here today. You know the deal. It's like but on Friday it's going to be 100, and on Saturday it's going to be 101, and probably like 150% humidity.
Up in
So,
You
I
up
don't
in
know
New
what I
Hampshire
don't
right
know
now?
if it's what it's like down in. No. We're still in Fayetteville. So
No.
I have a going to be a senior in high school this year, and so I retired in May of 22, and we decided. I mean, aside from what we were building with Donovan and Bank, we were staying here so that everybody, both our boys could graduate from high school, the same high school, and when Benjamin, my youngest, when he graduates from high school, we'll move out to Wilmington, North Carolina. And then I suspect I have a what's going to be a sophomore at NC State, and I think my youngest is going to end up at NC State too. So we'll be here for a while. If you had told me 5 years, kind of settling here.
Not for
No,
humidity,
yeah, look, it's
but
great. I mean, look, so that's one of the things right about North Carolina is there is this Venn diagram of benefits for veterans. They just recently passed a bill to make retirement pay non-taxable, which is great. Not a big deal, you save on state tax, but it's something. But there's all these other benefits that have to do with if you live in North Carolina, if your kid was born in North Carolina, if they're going to a North Carolina school. I mean, basically my kids go to NC State. I wouldn't even say for free. I'd say I'm making money on that kid's education because there's so much. He's got his North Carolina State stuff. He's got there's a lot of veteran scholarships. There's the VA Chapter 35 benefits. It's called the DEA, the Dependent Education Assistance. So I mean, it's really advantageous for us to be here for their education. And they both want to do higher education, secondary education. Even though I told them, I was like, look, just be plumbers, man. You'll just be plumbers. You be homeowners in like 2 years out of trade school. But they're very, both of them are. We're lucky. I mean, they're both really academically gifted, and so they love they actually like school. They like to learn. So college is actually a good option for them, even though I fundamentally think that college is kind of a scam at this point. But it is what it is. But yeah, so all that stuff combines to make North Carolina and we love Wilmington. Wilmington's really really nice, and a lot of what we do now. with the Donovan and Bank Foundation is, is a lot of it's here at Bragg, right? I mean, because this is the home of special operations, and so yeah, it makes a lot of sense being here.
Have you gotten used to saying Fort Liberty yet, or will you never? Are you
No,
a
I won't say it. I'm a
Bragg guy?
retiree. I can say whatever the hell I want,
You a
and I
Bragg
won't say
guy?
it. It's Fort Bragg, as it will be. I taught. I met a guy in California who was on the renaming committee, or he was somehow tied to it rather closely, right? So he
Right.
knew, he knew some details, and I was lamenting my complaint about how, hey, look, I get it. Bragg was a piece of shit. That guy was useless. Like, if you look at his history as a general, I don't think he
Terrible.
won a single battle, right? The guy was like an
Terrible.
absolute train wreck. So put aside whatever his political affiliation was, whether or not he was a Confederate, whatever. Put all that aside. I'm okay with being like, look, Bragg's probably not the best, you know, name for a bit. Okay, fine. Let's just we'll agree to shelve him as a base plank holder, right? But Jesus, give us something good. I mean, they get, you know what I mean? Like, how many options were there? Literally, even if you wanted to default to like a diversity or an inclusion,
Right.
philosophy, man, there. What about Benavides? Medal of Honor, Green Beret winner. Couldn't we have named it after him? There's so many good options, and like everybody else got an okay option. Like Benning, they got Moore. Hal Moore was the
Yeah.
guy was
Hal Moore.
legendary, right? So it's like, yeah, that's okay. Like, I can live with that. But Jesus, you got to give us the most benign, pointless, like, name you could possibly come up with. Fort Liberty. I get it's not. I mean, Liberty's cool,
Concept.
philosophically, but yeah. So no, it's gonna be. It'll always be Bragg to me.
It was one of those shocks. I got an email the other day from Fort Bragg Federal Credit Union, which actually changed its name also to Fort Liberty Federal Credit Union, and I was like,
Yeah, some of them are. Yeah, that's what I
closed my
thought. I
account
thought.
immediately.
Yeah, I thought that would be the thing, right? I thought that like all the local businesses would be like, well, we're not going to go through the trouble of change. They must have been. I assume they had like they were part of the conversation, right? Because there's a ton of Fort Bragg businesses, Fort Bragg, Federal Credit Union, but then there's all these other things,
Yeah.
that carry that name. So yeah, plus they look. That's what I really thought would end up putting the whole name change initiative to bed, was that it costs like $30 million to
Economic
change all
impact
those
on
names.
communities.
Like,
Yeah.
where are the taxpayers? You know what I mean? Where are the taxpayers when that's happening? Like, you would think somebody would be kind of pissed about that. They'd be like, yeah, that's not a good way to spend $30 million. We'll live with it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Well,
But anyway, yeah. So it is what it is. To change, and think about it. Like, kids who show up there now, they don't know anything else. They'll be like, oh yeah, I was stationed at Fort Liberty. They didn't know it as Bragg. It'll change really quickly. That's one of the things you probably already know.
yeah.
You learn this pretty quickly. You become irrelevant the day after you leave. You know what I mean? Yeah. So
You have a few of those, your good friends, connections that you reach out to now and then. Hey, man, what's up? That lasts for a year, and then everybody has their own life, right? Everybody finds new careers, and I got to tell you, Paul, that's part of why we're doing what we're doing with our game build. It's reconnecting to the tribe, man. I don't know why when we get out of the military, and I think guys like you understand this, and thus, Donovan Bank, et cetera. When you get isolated. This has been the most isolating time of my life. These 5 years since I've retired, working from home has been the most. I thought that was the dream, right? Oh, that's the dream. I'm going to work from home. It has been the loneliest, most isolating shit, and I'm constantly searching. The Legion or whether it's any other fraternal organization down the line. Man, it's just these walls get close during the day, and I reach out to guys like you and the foundation. You have conversations, and you're like, I just want to belong to something again, dude.
that's what look the message behind. And I can, we can go into Donovan and Bank and how it's all structured, but the bottom line is, like our big program is called the Janus Transition Program, And that's where most of our time, energy, and resources go. And we do these workshops and seminars. We do education training to the pre-command course. And for people who might not know what that is, that's where like future battalion and brigade and group commanders have to go for like a week-long training to prepare them for command. We brief there. We do an hour-long pension. So we do a lot through Janus. But the fundamental framework of Janus and the idea of transition assistance is that it's not about helping guys get a job, because it turns out that getting a job is the easy part of transition, right? And what guys struggle with, and dude, you just validated exactly this point exactly, and it gets validated over and over and over again. It used to be a theory, now we know it to be 100% true, is that when guys struggle, they struggle with the loss of purpose, identity, and community. And what you're talking about, Sean, I've heard that hundreds of times, and it's the exact same thing. And the words lonely and isolated come up time and time again, because guys don't appreciate. Look, when did you join?
In 89.
How old were you?
I was 18.
We're still in our formative years, right? And we are given this purpose, we are given this identity, and we're given this community. It doesn't cost us anything. We don't have to build it. It becomes part of who we are, so much so that it's intrinsically tied to us, right? And so on the community part, guys don't appreciate that this community is very, very unique. Like when you and I would walk into a team room, you could look at me and I would look at you, and we would know automatically without any words spoken that if shit goes sideways, I'll give my life for you and you'll give your life for me. Man, you're not going to find that level of commitment and camaraderie and brotherhood anywhere else. It just doesn't exist. Now, does that mean that you're doomed? No, of course not. You just have to appreciate that that's what it was. And then you have to find ways to either stay connected to it in a healthy way. And I'm not talking about, a Facebook page where you're, bitching about how the next generation sucks. That's not, and finding other people who will help stir your cup of woe. And you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. So, not that, but, healthy ways, building a new community that has, if not the same level of intensity, at least a meaningful level of intensity, right? And so, we talk because all the institutional programs, they don't talk about any of that stuff. They talk about, resumes and, how to dress for success and all this nonsense that guys with 20 years of service and soft, they don't need that. They need an understanding and an awakening and a change in their mindset to know that these are the things they're going to struggle with, and that's what they need to prepare for. They need to find a new purpose. They need to decouple from their identity, and they need to rebuild their community. Those are the things that we think are successful pillars of transition.
Well, I think I came to that realization. It took me a while, man. You stare in the mirror in the morning, and you maintain your routines for a while. It's the normal. Let's get up. Let's do some, whatever it is, fat boy PT now. Have your cup of coffee. Do work between the pain, whatever it is. But one. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the connection. But staring in the mirror one day, I realized there's a difference between the what and the who. And when you start talking about your purpose and identity, I realized that a Green Beret is what I was, but it's not who. Because if that's all you're ever going to be in your life, then you've already failed. And so, what's the next horizon? We always look to the next ridgeline, right? What's next? What's next? What's next? And then you have to find that purpose, motivation, and direction to get to that next, to the top of that next hill, whatever it is. In my case, I jumped off the deep end and went the entrepreneur route. And now I'm standing on the edge of the cliff going, holy shit, that's a long way down. But that's what it is. So let's dig into Donovan Bank a little, man. You started off with kind of an introduction about Janus. Let's dig into Janus a little bit. Tell me all about it. Number one, how'd you come up with the name? I think I have an idea.
Oh, what a great question, because it's a funny story, as they always are, right? Right. So I'll give you the kind of the entire overview, right? Because okay. You can't really talk about Donovan and Bank without first talking about the Janus program. Because what happened, I was getting ready in 2018. I was getting ready to drop my paperwork. So I was gonna, and what that means for folks who don't know, that's like the vernacular that we use for initiating retirement, right? So dropping your paperwork means you've you've officially declared I'm getting out. And I was going to do that in like February of 19, and then I'd walk out the door in February of 20. Because like I said at the outset, our only goal at that point was to make sure that our boys started and finished high school in the same place. And the only way to ensure that was I had to get out. Because if I made full bird colonel, which I was a special forces battalion commander, and there's only a handful of those. And usually, if you do that job, they'll promote you to the next level. Maybe I would have, maybe I wouldn't have. It doesn't matter. But if I had gotten promoted to the next level, man, that's like 3 moves in 3 years. It's crazy. So I was like, no, we got to get out. So I was getting ready to drop my paperwork, and I thought, well, I'll be smarter than the Army tells me I should be. I'm going to do something beyond just SFL TAP. And I had a buddy who had advised me to sign up for this course called the Tuck Next Step course at Dartmouth College. It's like a 2-week-long resident course at Dartmouth, and it's like for veterans and Olympic athletes, which sounds weird, but both those cohorts have dedicated themselves to a singular purpose that's suddenly gone, right? So they kind of struggle with the same stuff. So I applied for that program. I got accepted. I paid like $1,500 out of pocket, which was a huge bargain at the time, still is. And then I put in a leave form for it. Literally that week, Sean, I'm not kidding. It was the same week that I got accepted into the program and did all the stuff. Stu Ferris got picked up to be the training group commander. And Stu and I worked together a bunch. I've been his deputy at the SF command. We just known each other a long time, and we've worked together a lot. And he said, hey, I really want you to come over and be my deputy commander. And I thought, well, I won't move. They won't move me. I won't PCS, and I won't deploy from that job. So that won't affect the boys. That won't affect the boys' education. So yeah, right. I'll just kick my retirement down the road by a couple of weeks, right? By a couple of years. And so, and then I thought, oh man, I just wasted this money and this leave and everything else to go to this program, and it's going to be a blown opportunity, because what if I go there and somebody offers me a job? I can't take it, because I was thinking that it's all about getting a job, right? And then I thought, oh, the hell with it. I'll just go. I'll just see. What do I have to lose? I already paid the money. So I went. And when I went, what I realized was not only was I not starting transition too early, I was actually starting it too late. So when I got to training group, I told Stu, I said, listen, we really need to stand up a transition program for the unit. And all we need to do is just get guys started early. If we can get them to start transition 2 years out instead of 1 year out, then they'll be able to work on all these things. So anyway, we started kind of, toying with the idea. And and then I met Drew Stamp. So Drew at the time was an E7. He was a sergeant first class, and he was getting ready to medically retire. And he had been doing a lot of work in transition. He had been like doing a lot, because it was COVID, and he had been doing a lot of interviews and figuring out all these nonprofits and doing all this stuff. And I sat down with him, and within 15 minutes, I was like, oh, this guy needs to run this program. So I sold my soul to a couple of sergeant majors, got him transferred from the G3 over to us as XS, right? And he started running the program. I went away on leave, and it was we were just doing a transition program. And I was like, yeah, but we got to brand it. We got to come up with something. I left. I was gone. I left for leave. I was gone for like a week, and they had a little whiteboard session, and they came up with the name. And it was actually, I'm pretty sure it was Will Cunningham, who was the S3 at training group at the time, who came up with it. And I came back and I was like, are you serious? Every soldier's going to call this J Anus. This isn't going to work. I was like, but then, we started talking about what the meaning was. And so it's named after the Roman god of transition, right? That's why we have like January is named after Janus, same thing. So I was like, all right, that's kind of cool. So anyway, that's how we branded it, and it stuck. So then we started doing these, then we were doing like a lot of, under the Janus umbrella, we were doing a lot of like one-on-one counseling. We were telling people all this kind of stuff. And Drew and I were like, man, we're saying the same thing over and over and over again all day long. We should try to bring the mountain to Muhammad and maybe, tell all this stuff in like a 1 day, workshop. And so that's what we did. We built this 1 day workshop. We called it Janus 101. And we started getting calls. And the first call was from 10th Group. 10th Special Forces Group at Fort Carson, Colorado. I say that for the audience, not for Sean. He knows where all this stuff is. Right. But so we went out to 10th Group, and they were like, listen, we heard what you were doing. We want to do it too. Can you give us your stuff? And we're like, of course, you can take it all. We'll show you what we know. And once we started talking through it, Ignacio Garza, who was the guy who was trying to get something going at 10th Group, he said, listen, could you guys just come out and do this? Do your program for us? We're like, yeah, sure, why not? So we went out to 10th Group, and then we got a call from first group. Then we got a call from 5th Group. So Janice really started to take off. And so we were doing it from roughly 20 to 21. And then we started seeing the barn door. And I told Drew, I said, listen, man, I've been doing this a long time. And if we leave this here, it will die. Maybe they'll get a GS employee. Maybe they'll get a green suit. Doesn't matter. Whatever they do, no one's going to have the passion and commitment that we will. And the passive indifference of the bureaucracy will eventually just kill it off. So we got to take it with us. And that's what we decided to do. So in 2021, we created the Donovan and Bank Foundation. And the reason we chose that, because it was kind of an existing brand that I had been using to run a special operations experience for a different foundation. Mm-hmm. And they didn't want to do the special operations experience because they thought it was too dangerous. They had a bunch of lawyers that panicked. And I was like, yeah, no problem, man, whatever. So now we had an existing brand that special operators kind of recognized. So we created the Donovan and Bank Foundation, and we just made the Janice program a program within the Donovan and Bank Foundation. So, and then we developed these other programs. So we have a wellness program that we can talk about that helps guys get access to cutting edge treatment for TBI and PTS. That's become our second biggest program. When Stu Ferris retired, the next day he came and started working for us full time. So he runs the wellness program. And then we have the special operations experience, which we run twice a year, more like a fundraiser, but it's also a program because the way we run it is we bring in, potential donors, and they're in groups of 4, and every group of 4 has an active duty or recently retired SOF advisor. And then that advisor gets a chance to meet new people, build their network, perhaps be exposed to opportunities, and also appreciate how civilians or what civilians truly understand about special operations. Because whatever you think they understand,
you're wrong.
You tell me one run-of-the-mill garden variety soft thing that, oh, well, of course everybody knows what that is. And I will tell you, no, they don't. And as an example, on one of our first special operations experiences, we had 2 brothers. They were Iranian Jews who had emigrated to the United States and got into the fashion business in Manhattan and were running a successful fashion business. And Drew was their advisor at the experience. And he was explaining, because he had been promoted to E8. He medically retired as an E8. And he said, yeah, I was an E8 and Paul was an 05. And they were like, oh, so we didn't realize. So, because he's a younger guy, he's in his 30s. He's like, oh, so Paul worked for you. And he was like, well, no, and you know why? Because 8 is higher than 5. So of course, you know what I mean? Like people don't, and that's one of these things we tell guys. It's like, listen, don't worry about trying to convince, your future employer, your future community, whatever it is, that you were the 1% of the, the military. They don't know, and they don't care. It doesn't have the same meaning. It doesn't have the same value. It's not that they don't care about what you did or who you were. It's always, everybody, like, thank you for your service kind of mentality. It's like, yeah, no, we appreciate what you did. We're grateful for it. But how does that going to help us in this business that we're running right now? You know what I mean? Like, so getting people to understand that. But that was kind of the evolution of it, right? So we basically have like 4 programs that make up the Donovan and Bank Foundation. The Janice program is the big one. The second biggest one is Innovative Wellness. Probably the third biggest one is the Special Operations Experience. And then the last one is the Donovan and Bank Society. And that's where we're trying to build these little chapters all around the country that have, 3 civilians and about 3 to 9 soft veterans, just, again, to rebuild community, to have a place to, people to get with quarterly for shared learning, opportunities, networking, camaraderie, community, all that kind of stuff. That one's new. We haven't really got that one off the ground yet, but we have a number of people interested, so I think it'll work. And then we have kind of our future development program is we're trying to put together like a 1 or a 2 hour training session for companies to help them understand how to recruit veterans. I think the working title of the workshop is Your Veteran Recruiting Sucks. And the reason is because so many companies are buying into this, veteran is a victim. How do I accommodate veterans? That's all bullshit. We're like, don't do that. You'll get veterans that way, but you get the shitty ones.
Mhm.
What you want is the veterans who rise. Because guess what? I hate to break it to you. Spoiler alert, there is a such thing as a shitty veteran. I know everybody thinks that's sacrosanct, and we're like, oh, no, guess what? There's a bell curve, right? So if you go down that road of accommodation and how can we attract you and make this more attractive for you as a veteran, that's a fool's errand. The thing you want to do is you want to challenge them. Be like, you need to rise to the challenge of being here. That's how you get the good guys. That's how you get guys like we know. You know what I mean? Because that's what they thrive on. They thrive on being challenged. They don't thrive on being accommodated and entitled. So that's another program we're trying to work on as well. But yeah, that's kind of the whole thing in a nutshell.
That really is that next ridgeline. And you mentioned, the translation of military skills over to civilian skills. I know you remember Brian Halstead.
Yeah, yeah,
So
vet line, yeah.
so you talk about vet line, upline. We had Brian on the show a couple of weeks back. What a great tool. I was one of the initial enrollees in that. We all depend on our network to be, rats in the maze, so to speak. And the evolution of that program over the last, 3 to 5 years, I think, is just phenomenal. And if there's one thing I hate, is resumes, because it seems like the transition experience, like you mentioned earlier, is really all about how can I translate my military skills. Well, it's easy. You go to VetLine, you type in your shit, and it links it right up. Done. Right. That's done. So resume writers out there who write the same stupid resume for every soft guy from, E7 to O10, you're about to be out of a job. I'm putting you on notice now. But it's just that's it, right? And down here, and I got to tell you, Paul, when you get away from the flagpole, you don't know how warm it is under the dragon's wing. When you get out here in where I'm at in San Antonio, right? It's Military City, USA, and I had expectations, right? I walked out of the service, and I did a decent transition, or what I thought was a decent transition, with no assistance. But you walk out into that world, and you put to work what they teach you in SFL TAP. And by the way, I didn't know how much shit was available until I went to TAP. I recommend, if you're going to go to it 24 months out, and then go to it again at 18 months out, just to see what the change, because then you can take advantage of some of the things that you guys are talking about, internships, et cetera, et cetera. Anyhow, if you're an Air Force cyber dude in San Antonio, Texas, you're a shoo-in. You can walk on any place, right? If you're, all the things that they mentioned, the Lean Six Sigma and project management guy and blah 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 blah, that might get you a call. Literally, I played the resume game. The 100 resumes on Indeed and every other damn thing out there. You know how many calls I got? Is zero.
And I'll tell you exactly why. Because by some estimates, about 3 to 7% of people are hired off of their resume, off what you're describing. The other 97 to 93% are hired off of warm introductions, networking, and relationships. And so we tell guys all the time, it's like, why would you hedge your bet on a 3 to 7% chance of success? I mean, the Marines would, but most special operations guys wouldn't, right? So no, seriously, we wouldn't do a single operation that has a 3% chance of succeeding. No one would approve that. But yet we go down this road of, trying to build the perfect resume and investing all this energy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, number one,
did it.
Like the skills transference stuff is, we tell them people aren't necessarily interested in your skills. They're interested in your attributes. And, our guys generally bring 5 things to the table that are like gold in the marketplace: energy, a bias for action. They do what they say they're going to do. And you've been out for a while, so you know what a rare commodity that is, right? It's unbelievable, dude. Like, if I had a nickel for every, high-powered president, CEO, captain of industry that told me they were going to do something on a Friday, and I have to bother him like 2 weeks later, be like, where the hell are you at with this email you said you were going to send? Like, little things, So having people who do what they say they're going to do, that can solve complex problems with very little resources and guidance, and are highly adaptable. Those 5 attributes are like gold, man. And you can't communicate that in a resume. You need to have a resume that doesn't look like garbage, because once you meet somebody, they'll probably say, oh, cool, send me your resume. So you want to have it. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, like, that's one of the things we tell people when they start 2 years out. It's like, don't worry about a resume. If you need to get one, here's a dozen resources that you can use to just get one done. Now you've got that. Now you don't have to worry about it. You're not thinking about it as much. But it's only going to be your calling card. It's not going to be the thing that gets you into your next opportunity.
It's a
And
breaching point.
and the thing about Vetline and other resources is that's the way we structure the Janus program is we build it into a targeting model. So we present it to folks from the perspective of find, fix, finish. Now, again, guys in our community, they all understand what that means. But for folks who don't, the find, fix, finish model is a targeting model. It's a thing you use when you want to target something and generally want to destroy it or maybe capture it. But let's just say destroy it. And so the longest portion is the find phase. That's when you got to like go out and figure out where it is. You got to see what, if it's an individual you're trying to target, what their pattern of life is, all this kind of stuff. That takes a lot of time and energy and resources. Then the fix phase, well, that's a little narrower. That's when you kind of understand what you're going after, and now you're trying to figure out exactly where you're going to get it, and the timing of it and all that kind of stuff. And then the finish phase is when you actually employ the weapon system that you're going to use to destroy it. And so we tell these guys, you wouldn't decide that you're going to use a JDAM on a target without doing the find, fix, finish, right? Because you might not need that. You might need a precision weapon, right? So we try to get them to understand that the find phase is the most important. That's when you figure out, what your next purpose is going to be. Because once you figure out your purpose, that purpose can find purchase just about anywhere. Then you want to start, later on, more towards the tail end of the fix phase or in the finish phase. That's when you want to start actually putting together a resume that's targeted towards the things that you want to do. But you need to figure that stuff out on the front end, right? And you need to be fulfillment focused, not job focused. Like that's our huge message is, we have an official motto that is embrace what is earned, right? It's this idea that, hey, you've earned the right to live this life of peace, contentment, and balance, which is that's our mission statement. And so getting them to figure that stuff out, that takes time. And most people need help. Like if I say to you, hey man, who are you? Like at your core, you probably know because you've been out for a while and you've had to think through those things. But you ask somebody that question, generally they're like, I don't know, I'm a Green Beret. You know what I mean? Like it takes a while, and most people aren't introspective and self-aware enough to conclude on their own, who they are at their core. So they need help and they need guidance. But that stuff takes time. It's, the transition is it's not laborious, but it is lengthy. It does, and you got to give yourself enough time to think through these things, because solving for purpose, identity, and community, they're not hard, but they definitely take time, and they generally take some assistance.
Well, I mean, as you look at that, so as a former battalion commander, when people say to you, hey boss, I need to start my transition, in the past 25 years ish, the op tempo was just so damn high that people were literally working until the day that they walked out the door.
Yeah.
And so, well, we didn't do our forces right, but I think as well as I do, when you pull your finger out of a glass of water, there's no hole left behind, no matter how self-important you may feel at the time or how much people pump your ego bulb. In the end, when you walk away, somebody will fill in right behind you. And so we have to bring that same understanding. And transitions are different, from my seat as a W4, yours is an 05/6, somebody else's is an E8. That looks different from every seat, right? Because if you're in command and you're retiring out of command, obviously there's a lot of things to be closed up. That's not you know what I mean? Command for you as well.
No, you're hitting on something really important, and I like the analogy. When you pull your finger out of a glass of water, there's no hole left behind. We tell people all the time. So our official bumper sticker is embrace what is earned. Our unofficial bumper sticker is transition will be difficult for you until you accept you're a piece of shit. And what I mean by that is you have to accept that you are no longer the go-to guy. Like you have to start investing in yourself, and you have to recognize that the system is not designed to care about you in that way, right? It's not designed to care about the contributions of one person, because if it was, it would have failed 248 years ago, right? And so getting guys I'm telling you, that is the biggest hurdle, because at some point they are going to have to go into the person who depends on them the most and say, hey, I can't do that project. I got to do this retirement thing. That's really hard for some guys. And it's impossible if you're in an operational assignment. So one of the things we tell people right up front is like you said, retiring from command, that's suicide, man. You're not going to be able to do it right. Maybe if you're a 3-star, okay, because you're going to have the benefit of being able to take 6 months off after because you're going to be in really, really good financial shape. And so are most guys. I mean, most of the guys who retire are going to have if you do 20 years in soft, I'm not saying this is the goal. I'm just saying it's the statistical reality. If you do 20 years in soft, you're going to have a lot of VA compensation, right? I don't like to call it VA disability because that's not really what it is. When people are compensated for all the, wear and tear that this job puts on them, that's really quality of life compensation. So guys are going to have a pretty reasonable, they're going to get compensation from the VA and their retirement. So in some cases, they're going to be really, really close to what they were making on active duty. So you don't need to bridge this huge financial gap. So you'll have room to make those decisions. But at the end of the day, it's like you said, like the biggest thing is that you have got to understand that the system doesn't care about you in that way. It's not designed to, and it's not that your contributions haven't mattered, your relationships with your peers, that's all good, but the system just doesn't care about you. Like you said, I was a deputy group commander. If I got hit by a bus on a Friday, you know what they'd say on Monday? They'd say, well, hopefully, maybe if I was lucky, they'd be like, oh, Tulin, that's too bad. He was a nice guy. But right after that, they'd be like, who's going to sign these 638s this week? Because I got to get these done. Is that the XO? You mean like that's it? The beat, it will not miss a beat. It just won't. So you got to realize that, because if you don't, the system will take its pound of flesh till the very last day, no problem. And when you walk out the door, it'll slam you on the ass and be like, hey, sorry, we don't know who you are anymore. And 3 younger people just took your place. Well, maybe not this year. Recruiting's a little shitty, but maybe it's 1 younger person. But my point is, if you're not your own advocate, no one is going to advocate for you. And so, it'll be really tough, but doing it from a team, doing it from a command position, doing it from a primary staff, those are all terrible places to try and retire from. So we tell guys, and they're like, well, then if I tell them, they're going to put me on the B team. We're like, yeah, man, exactly. Let them put you somewhere where your contribution isn't as significant, because you know the deal. You can't do that in a team room. You have to be all in there. I mean, maybe depending on the timing, maybe you get lucky, but man, that's an anomaly. So if you're in an operational assignment of any kind, that's a terrible place to try to retire from.
And that is part of, I think, the education that I believe you guys are doing too for commanders, to understand, since you've walked in those shoes yourself, you got to throttle back on that dude when he comes to you. And this is many things, right? We talk about PTS and several of the other afflictions for the community, et cetera. When somebody takes a knee and faces out to drink a little water, and they say, hey, boss, I need a little help here, that you might as well sign your death warrant. I mean, they're benching your ass. All right, fine, go to the psych. You're off the team, you're on the B team, blah, 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 blah. Nobody wants to do that. That is a problem. Community. You're so afraid, that stigma exists so strongly in you that you just don't seek help. I think it's a big mistake.
Yeah, and so one of the things when we go to pre-command course, one of the things, and I think I might have mentioned this, we try to educate leaders on, is that transition assistance is not the enemy of readiness and retention. And I would argue, and we have the data we have the anecdotes at least to back this up. It's actually the opposite, right? So we've heard from a lot of commanders who will tell us, yeah, look, once we started like our own kind of transition program, retention actually went up. And it's easy to understand, because if you're thinking about your long-term, your longevity in the organization, and you see people being treated properly and being helped and taken care of on the way out, well, then you're not going to worry about it. That's going to inspire you to stay more than it's going to inspire you to leave. And I think there's generally, like, we don't really run into the commanders who have that mindset of, if you help somebody to get out, you're going to be damaging retention. You're going to be losing guys that otherwise you would keep. That's a very old school mentality. It still exists to some degree. Mm-hmm. I think it's funny because even the guys, and I won't mention any names because these are guys that we know, but they're still serving an active duty, and I'm not trying to throw them under the bus. But I know guys that were like really supportive of transition, and then they get into like higher positions of authority, and they start feeling the pressure of like their numbers and how many people they're keeping, and they start turning their back on it a little bit because they're trying to deal, because their upward mobility and their daily survival is tied to their ability to keep their units strong, so to say, from a strength perspective.
Of course.
And so I think, the short-sighted folks see a dip in retention and they panic, and then they kind of stop, focusing on transition. But that's another reason why, that's the primary reason why we don't take any money from the government. We're totally privately funded. Everything that we do is by private donations. And we got a lot of shitty advice early on about scale and monetization and contracting with the government. I'm like, man, I'm not going to do any of that, because transition assistance is only one conflict or bad leader away from no one giving a shit, right? So you have a unit that's like all in on transition, and we're going out there and helping them. If I'm tied to those people financially, like they're paying the bills for us, then they can stop paying the bills, number one, and we can't go out there anymore. And number two, they might not, they just might not support us. And then what? Like, I don't have access anymore. So now I can't go help those guys. So we do everything. I mean, we have great relationships with every unit. We are welcomed with open arms all the time. But if that stops, we're still going to keep doing what we're doing. We're just going to, we do most of our stuff off post, but, we'll do it off post, and we'll just put out the invites, and, hopefully people will still come. But, we don't take any money from the government, because I don't want them to be able to tell me what to do. You know me well enough to know that that's just kind of how I am anyway. But you know what I mean? Like, I don't want them to be able to tell me what to do, when we can go, where we can go, because we're always worried that, look, one group commander changes, one group command change a command, and the transition attitude could completely change in the entire unit. You know what I mean? And so we want to make sure that we're divorced from that, so we can always still provide the services that we provide.
Well, and honestly, I think that definitely tied to the retention thing. So you get that little whisper in your ear. It's like, hey, look, man, half of your teams are empty. You need to go ahead and fix that. Otherwise, your OER is going to suffer.
They're in kind of a panic right now, because recruiting sucks. But it's like, man, you know what? Like, the nation will answer the call when the time comes. Don't worry about it. Like, it's okay. Like, you got to look at strength over the long term. It always has hills and valleys. It just does. You know what I mean? So it's probably not something that they should be panicking about, but it's not my
So what's Paul Toolan's answer to fixing retention and recruiting right now?
Well, on a tactical level, like, sure. I think it seems to me that they've lost their way in terms of the most viable candidate pool for recruiting, right? It seems to me, look, first of all, I don't buy into this idea that the next generation is lost and they all suck and they're all entitled. I work, I officiate. My wife's she was the head coach. Now she's the assistant coach at the high school swim team. I officiate at high school swim team matches, because she told me I had to. But it's great. But look, these young kids, these high school, they're awesome, man. Like, they're like so much more tolerant of others. They're like supportive of each other. It's like, it's really great. I mean, they're really, like, I promise you, like, we used to go out to Camp McCall. So again, for folks who don't know, Camp McCall is a base separate from Fort Bragg, where most of the Special Forces training takes place. It's 40 minutes due west of Fort Bragg, so to speak. And, if you talk to the senior guys out there, like the civilians that have been there a long time, they'll tell you the same thing. They'll be like, listen, the whole generational divide is a red herring. Because guess what the cadre were saying about you when you were here? They were saying you suck. You mean it's time immemorial, right? So I don't think that they're all lost. I think, though, that the military is trying to appeal to this very small demographic, based on some political pressure and leanings and ideology and stuff like that. And it's like, look, I have no problem with appealing to whatever group you think is the most like you should be appealing to the group that is most likely to serve, not the group that you think should be serving that doesn't want to anyway. You know what I mean? Like, high school athletes, college athletes, like there's groups that are really easy to target that they don't target for some reason. So that would be one thing, is like, look, you got to target the right demographic. Like, you're getting wrapped up in all the wrong things, and it might feel good to be part of the groundswell of appealing to certain ideological leanings. You want to recruit you want to recruit more women, or you want to recruit more, I don't know what,
of a particular demographic, whatever the case.
yeah, whatever it is, you know what I mean? And that, I mean, I'll throw this out there just to throw it out there. I don't give a shit how people live their life. It's fine. It doesn't matter to me. But let's just say let's just say you decide that you're going to specifically create recruiting campaign that targets homosexuals. Okay, whatever. That's fine. You feel like ideologically that's really important. But how many of them are there, and how many of them there are that want to serve? You know what I mean? Like, the numbers don't make sense to me. Like, you have to look at like just simple numbers of things. So they're not doing that. And the other thing is, I would say that the problem doesn't necessarily need to be fixed. It is what it is. This is a societal problem. There is a such thing as an insolvable problem. And it's, look, and special operations is funny because, special operations has both a blessing and a curse of thinking they always know better, right? They have the answers that nobody, we can figure it out. You're all a bunch of fucking morons. We got this, right? And I remember telling them when they were like burning it down to solve recruiting, I'm like, listen, there are literally people in the Pentagon being murdered to solve this problem. And they're really smart people. You know what I mean? They can't solve it. And it's not because you're not going to figure out what they haven't figured out. They've got a tremendous amount of brain power and resources and energy dedicated to solving that problem. So why do we think we can solve it better than they can? But there is a such thing as an insolvable problem. And the military is terrible with that idea. We can't handle that idea at all. So just being like, oh, you know what? I think we kind of just going to have to ride this one out and see, wait until and kind of adjust. They're not good at that. Like, I'll give you a little bit more special operations dirty laundry, right? So when I was on active duty, they told me I had to be on this OPT, and OPT is an operational planning team. It's like a special group of planners that come together to solve a particular problem. And they had this OPT. It was called the 100% end strength OPT, and they were going to figure out how to get the operational detachments, which are special forces units of action. That's like the A team. They were going to figure out how to get that to 100% because they were under strength. There's supposed to be 12 men, and they were like, it was like in some cases like 8 guys or 9 guys. So it was just generally under strength, right? So so they were going to try and figure this out. And I went to the first OPT, and it was actually remote, so I was doing it on a phone, and they already had solutions. They were like, we're going to look at retention, recruiting, utilization. So in other words, where people were hanging out. And there was a fourth one, I don't remember what it was. And I was like, listen, man, that's not how you solve problems. You don't solve problems by backward engineering from the solutions you hope to implement. You have to ask yourself real questions. And so I said, because the answers are really easy. You, like the 4th Battalion. So in the mid 2000s, we expanded Special Forces from 3 battalions to 4 battalions. And then after the 2 wars essentially ended, you had these 4th battalions, and they wanted to keep them, so they changed them into this other thing, which was more specialized. But the bottom line is, you got to kill the 4th battalion. That was a failed experiment. You just can't afford it anymore. We had 6 teams in a company. You got to go back to 5. Like, these are all perfectly reasonable. Like CA and PSYOP, failed experiment. You got to cut those guys. You got to cut those guys loose back to the conventional force. But nobody wants to do that stuff. The answers are right there, but nobody wants to take the politically suicidal step to actually do it. Because you could do it. Like if you're the CG at Special Forces Command, or you're the commanding general at USASOC, Special Operations, United States Army Special Operations Command, you can take those steps. That's going to be the last thing you do. That's it. You're killing yourself professionally. And most guys don't want to do that, But yeah, so I mean, so I guess my very long answer to your question is, you got to target the right demographic. You're targeting the wrong demographic, and you got to take a step back and maybe look at restructuring, what your requirements are, right? Because you just don't need as many people right now, and that's okay. Because when and again, the Army is we're terrible at dialing things back. We're really good at building things up. But once they're built up, we just feel like we have to keep them,
The thing, I'm a grassroots UW kind of guy. And so when you look at targeting, right, you're always trying to target a population that you know nothing about. And so if you think you can understand today's 18 to 22-year-old crowd who's probably the target that you want right now, good luck. Unless you're one of them, you can't do it. What you can target is their parents. And so this, because of the indoctrination that comes over the 24-hour news cycle, I'm subject to indoctrination just like everyone else is. We all know that. And so when you see that constant drumbeat about it's bad and patriotism in this country and nationalism, not the crazy nationalism like everybody likes to associate it with, but national pride and patriotism, I think are at again, according to the indoctrinator, a low in this country. And that's because it's along lines of age or sex or gender or race or whatever the case might be. And I like to preach that message of, look, man, we're not different. And I love to experiment in San Antonio because it's a diverse demographic down here. I make it a point to talk to the person in line ahead of me, whoever it is, whether it's a kid, an old person, whoever it might be. And instantly it's rapport is established almost immediately simply by just talking to them.
Yeah, no, look, I'm going to tell you
that.
right now. I'm going to tell you I'm going to predict exactly what you're going to say, which is what I tell everybody. I tell everybody when they lament the state of the nation and how divided we are. I'm like, okay, but what was your day like today? Yeah. Who did you interact with today? Was it contentious? Did you run into, so in the example I always give is exactly what you're describing. And at the height of the George Floyd, the George Floyd debacle, sure, yeah. When all that stuff, the summer when that was all happening, right, and there was a ton of protests and there's a ton of riots and all that kind of stuff, right? I would be driving to my job at Bragg, and I took a particular route, and there was a Dunkin' Donuts on the way, and I always hit that Dunkin' Donuts at about the same time. And so I'm an old white guy, right? There was a young Black female who would get her coffee generally about the same time. I think she was in the medical profession because I think she wore scrubs a lot. And what the information ecosystem was telling me was that every interaction with her, there would be, hostility, distrust, cynicism, skepticism. And you know how that panned out every single day? I'd open the door for her, or she would open the door for me. We'd joke about what our coffee was. There was always a smile and a hello. And maybe people would be like, yeah, well, that's just a, superficial daily meeting. Bullshit. That's how real people interact. No, really. You know what I mean? Like, so anytime someone's like, oh yeah, this country is so divided. I'm like, listen, man, what was your day like? Is that what you experience on a daily basis? My mother-in-law, who I love, wonderful, wonderful, generous, kind, decent, smart lady.
Keep it up.
Yeah, she's great. No, I really mean it. I've already got the girl.
You got the trophy, right?
Decades. No, I don't need, you know what I mean? I don't need to bullshit anybody, right? So but my mother-in-law is great. She's older and she reads a lot of headlines. And so, it's a lot of bad news, always bad news that she's reading. And I'm like, Carol, I was like, what'd you guys do today? It's like, oh, we went over to, a pond. I went and got our Starbucks. And I was like, yeah, it's like, what's the reality of your life? Because I promise you, it's nothing close to what you're being told it is. And I've been able to validate that over and over and over again. Like, we go to California. We got a lot of supporters in California. It just kind of worked out that way. We were just there this past week, and we were in a bunch of places where people will tell you it's chaos, it's all burning down. Man, it was none of that. I mean, you see the regular, inner city stuff. You know what I mean? Poverty and inequity, all those kind of things for sure. Those are all things that need to be addressed. But generally speaking, all of our interactions with people were amazing. Because you're right. It's all that example. It's all. You're standing in line and you talk to the person in front of you. And do they turn around and talk to you like a Facebook post? No, because that's not, because when you have actual physical, psychological, emotional, accountability in personal space, people don't act like that. No. They just don't. It's all bullshit.
We talked about this morning on another program I was on, and it's there's a lot of internet heroes out there, tough guys, and a lot of those are within our own community. I'll just be honest with you, when you do have genuine human interaction with people, you find out very quickly that you're more the same than you are different, and it doesn't matter uh, who you're talking to. Just like you said, that personal accountability I think is lost because of social media, the internet, the 24-hour news cycle, etc. I have found a way to actually stop that. You just take that little red button on the top of your remote control and you push it,
Turn that shit off, man.
and
Turn it
it's
off.
gone. Yeah,
Listen,
it's gone.
man, even I'm fond of telling people that there's no such thing as liberal media or conservative media. There's only corporate media. People tuned in, and that's what they do. So yeah, the best advice is turn it off, man. Just turn it off. Yeah, you're not missing anything.
No, tune out and go tune in to something that's more positive, and just look, man, just play music.
Yeah,
White
yeah,
noise music if you have to, but
yeah.
uh,
Or do some, do a small thing. Like there's brain chemistry involved with helping other people. It really is.
100%.
Like it
It's all
releases
dopamine.
dopamine. Like
Yeah.
just do small things. I have a friend in the UK. His name is Dave Pye. He's an unbelievable character. Really, I mean, this guy is like a ball of energy at all times. He's a really amazing dude. And he's got this initiative that I was involved in. I'm still involved in it, but he's trying to rebuild it in a different direction called the Green Marine. And the Green Marine was
I
all
remember
it
that.
was about, it was about reconnecting people to each other and to the planet, right? So this idea of, and it was predicated on this idea of micro missions, just doing the small things that you can do, like hold the door open for somebody, say good morning or good afternoon. Like if you see a little piece of trash on the
Pick it
ground,
up.
pick it up and throw it in the trash. Like those things matter. Like you can go and you can protest and you can go to some rally. Okay, that has its place. But if you really want to make a difference in the world and for yourself, man, just start doing little things that you can do every day, and it's not hard. It doesn't cost you a nickel,
The funny thing, I go out of my way to do this. I try to do one good turn a day. It comes from my Boy Scout time. But when you go to the store and there's a person there, an older person, they're shopping by themselves. You know what it costs me to help them unload their groceries and go take their shopping cart and put it away?
Oh yeah.
Nothing. It cost me just a minute at a time.
To that. I gave time that they were tearing down. They've got a street. It's called like Monument Way or something like that, where all these statues were, and they were tearing them all down, right? Because they were all Confederate generals and this and that. They left the one of Arthur Ashe because that has a direct tie to the community. Maybe some other ones that they left, but they tore most of the other ones down. And I was up there helping some guys with a documentary. So I was at a prison up there, and I helped negotiate going into the prison and doing some other things. But I wasn't involved in any stuff. I just was sitting around most of the day. So I was sitting around, and there was this old gentleman, this tall, older African American gentleman. He had some trouble the night before and had been detained, but they were releasing him that day. It's no big deal. And he was looking for a ride, and of course, the police can't give him a ride. They're like, "Oh, sorry, Mister." They knew who he was. They're sorry, Mister. His name was Winston. And they were like, and he's like, "Well, the bus isn't running today. I don't know what I'm going to do." And I was just sitting there. I was like, "Hey, sir," I was like, "Where are you headed?" And he was like, "Such as." I said, "I can give you a ride." I said, "I don't have anything to do for a couple hours." I said, "I'll give you a ride." He's like, "Oh," and he started crying, Sean. He started crying, like he was so overwhelmed. And so we were driving down that Monument Way. I was like, "Hey, Winston," I said, "what do you think about them tearing down all these statues?" He's like, "Oh man," he's like, "those statues weren't bothering nobody." Like, it's funny. Like, he was the guy that they were supposed to be protecting from being offended and oppressed. And he was like, that was the dumbest thing ever. But my point in all that was like, it was nothing. I was sitting around. I had nothing to do. It was no big deal to give this guy a ride. I gave him a ride. I'm an interesting guy. He was a nice old guy. dropped him off. We stopped. We got a little lunch, and you would have thought that I had won the Silver Star saving this guy's life in combat. You know what I mean? Like he was that grateful, and it cost me absolutely nothing. And like I think about it to this day, it still gives me great pride and joy to remember helping this guy who just needed a ride, and it costs you nothing. But I'm telling you, it does more. Like we really try to preach that in Janus and in Donovan Bank is starting to practice, gratitude and giving back. Not by giving us a donation, I don't give a shit about that, but just by building that into your transition, because that's just a huge tool to help you feel better as you go through this difficult and sometimes depressing process. Like when you go through the VA process, and for people who don't know, the VA process is you have to actually, for the first time in your career, in a lot of cases, you have to start listing out all of your aches and pains. You got a bad shoulder, and that shit's depressing. That can get very depressing because you're like, oh, I see. Based on this piece of paper, I'm a very old, broken man. You know what I mean? So it can get kind of depressing. So you got to get past that. But having those things, having those practices in your life where you're doing little positive things, man, you can't put a price on that for any number of things. Just for living your life, never mind for transition, but certainly for transition, it's one of the things we try to help guys wrap their head around is like start to adopt the philosophy of gratitude and giving back in your day-to-day life, because most of these guys have a call to serve. That's why they did 20 something years in the military. And so a lot of these guys want to continue to serve in some way, and maybe it's through your job, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's in another way. It doesn't have to be tied to your job per se.
I think with that servant leadership, I think is built into so many of us. And again,
Yeah.
when you start searching for that dopamine high, it used to be skydiving, halo jumping, scuba diving, whatever the case is. If you're too old and broken to continue that activity once you retire, then you got to find some kind of an adrenaline rush, man. And I have found a lot of that in just simply helping people. And it's the small things that don't take a lot of coordination, just like you mentioned with Winston. It's not that hard. Just go do something today for somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, we take people through something called the hero in victory and hero in retreat, and it's like when you look at these high points and low points in your career, and you identify what the high points are, and you're like, oh, that's what motivates you. That's what gets you up out of bed every morning, right? So for some guys, it's that adrenaline rush. It's like they love that shit. So it's like, okay, you probably need to find some way to continue to feed that. Maybe it's part of your job, maybe it's not, but it's important for you to understand that, that thing. And for others, it's just like helping others. There's a lot of different motivations that go into it, but identifying it is key. And like I said, it's not hard. It takes time. You really got to work through it. I mean, like, you're where you're at, but you did it from the day you got out onward, and so, so it's a lot more stressful when you're out there on your own, trying to figure it out on your own, trial and error on your own, all that kind of stuff. But most of us are really resilient that way, and we'll get there like you did. You know what I mean? Our goal is to let you figure all that out before you get out. So from the day you get out onward, you're already in that, successful transition headspace, as opposed to, what was it like? What were your first 2 years like?
Oh, it was, swimming in a pretty deep pool. It's learning how to speak civilian, learn how to fit in. And I defaulted to what I knew. I called up a buddy of mine who was doing some work overseas, not the serious contracting gig, but other stuff. And, we went to work together. We solved a few problems for folks over there, but a lot of it was about that interaction. Going to a unit in UCOM and understand what their requirements are for new equipment, things I did in the Army. Helping write that requirement up, going through the acquisition process, dealing with some of these other contractors. It was, fulfilling work to a degree, but there wasn't that camaraderie pool that I was looking for. Just, me and my partner out there, hustling to get business kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And as, the opportunity that I'm currently in came along for me, it was exciting because there's a lot of unknowns. I don't have a PhD from Harvard. I don't park in front of the bar. I had to go figure this business thing out. And I got to tell you, there's lumps. But you don't fail. You just learn and you move on to the next thing. And man, I'll tell you, the business world right now, given current situation, economy, et cetera, it's difficult. And the more tools you can stuff in your toolbox before you get out of the military, the more connections that you make with the network, depending on what you want to do, I think so many of us don't know what the hell we want to be when we grow up. It's
No,
somebody,
yeah.
someone's
That's what
always
people
told
say.
us.
It's like, oh, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. It's like, yeah, okay. Nobody does. You need to figure that out.
Right, exactly.
So tell me a little bit about what you're doing now.
I'll tell you what, let's take about a minute pause here. We got a break here at 5 after. So we'll go off air for just a little bit. When
Okay.
we come back, I'll tell you what we've been up to, and we'll talk through some specifics about Janice and the rest of the programs that you guys have going on at Donovan and
Yeah.
Back.
Right.
So let's take about a 5 minute break here, and we'll be right back on Vet Connect. Stay with us.
Mark and I have both been in the infantry in the Army. I had been in the Marines prior to that. We both ended up in a unit called 1st Special Forces Group.
I was a sniper in the infantry, been a sniper in Special Forces, and did a full career in different types of teams, mountain team, air ops team, counterterrorism team. I met Curtis actually at Fort Lewis when he was running a sniper locker, and then we were on a team together in Okinawa. We've been friends, and we've always talked about going into business and life after the Army.
We got out, went to work in the civilian world, and realized a lot of what we did in the military translated to business. We looked at the cutlery industry, and the people there as a culture were fantastic. And we said, hey, we're going to start a knife company here in North Carolina.
In the beginning, we had a knife grinder, a blaster, some rudimentary tools. We started out and decided, what do we want to make? Well, let's make something we know. So it was a combat knife, and we did 3 models because we figured you got to have more than one when you start out.
You know, you think you know everything about knife because you carried one all your life. But to be quite honest, we were new at it. We didn't know everything, so we took them to a lot of our Special Forces buddies at Fort Bragg. They gave us some advice and allowed us to develop those initial products. Today, we have a whole lot more offerings than we did in those early days. We actually have 3 distinct lines of knives we call gold, silver, and bronze. Gold being the knives we make right here in our shop in North Carolina. The silver line knives are those made for us by our partners up in Olean, New York at K-Bar. And our bronze line are knives we design using US-made steel that are manufactured overseas. A lot of folks think we have a giant manufacturing facility with 100 people. And quite honestly, we have 10 core people that we use to build our knives.
Making a knife isn't as simple as most people think. There are many processes that are involved, so we have checks and balances and continuous quality control throughout the processes. We know that perfection should not get in the way of getting your job done. So while we strive for perfection, we know we'll never achieve it.
I'll never forget the first time we won a Blade Show Award because of the rest of the industry, the people who do what we do, saying, hey, you guys have this figured out. We realize quality, it's not just the time we put into making the knives, it's not just the high-end materials or processes or even the money we spend, our raw cost to make those knives. In the end, quality is proven out by the people that hold them and use them, right? If someone's willing to pay for it, and they're willing to carry it, and they're happy to carry it, they might even brag about it, to us, that's the measure of quality. We don't chase trends. We don't put things on knives that don't need to be there. We always joke, and I know this sounds ultra simplistic, sharp, pointy, with a comfortable handle. You do those 3 things, you're probably going to be successful in knife making. And I think if you can take a look at a knife, it's very, very simple, but you can immediately say, I know who designed that, or I know who made it. To me, that's a measure of success. That's what we try to do here at Spartan Blades.
Both Curtis and I care about our country. We fought for it. We took our oath seriously and still do to this day. So since our product goes to end users who use it in the most ultimate fight, we take it seriously, what we make. That when it goes in a box and it gets sent to a customer, that it's ready to go wherever you need to go. And it's going to be there and perform. And that's what we strive for every day.
No, that's cool.
So it's the beauty of having a fucking big brain technical guru guy who's running things. All right, we're back on Vet Connect. Welcome back, Paul Tulin from Donovan and Bank Foundation. Before the break, we decided we were going to talk a little bit more in depth about some of the experiences that Donovan Bank brings to its members. And I was talking to Paul kind of about what we're doing with them Frontlines as a video game. So what we're talking about is kind of that overall wellness of soldier from entry into to exit as a veteran, and the fact that there doesn't exist a cogent data set of mental data matched with, biometric data in the middle of that. So anyway, off camera, we were just talking a little bit about that back and forth. And you and I can talk offline about that. But so what I want to dig into now, man, I want to dig into your part, specifically Special Operations Experience Program, for what you're doing for Donovan Bank. Tell me all about that.
About the Special Operations Experience?
Yep.
Yeah. So basically what happened was I used to volunteer for a nonprofit called the Spookstock Foundation, which is a
I remember
take
you
on,
mentioning that. Yep.
yeah, it's a take on Woodstock, right? Because what they do every year is they run these clandestine, secretive music events. Like the last couple of, the last handful were like Old Dominion Band and Lenny Kravitz and Sammy Hagar, Billy Idol. So they have a kind of a 80s, 90s old guy, because they run these events in used to be only in DC, but now they're in Tampa too. But they try to connect folks to the IC and the special operations community, like businesses, right? So Spookstock's model is they get companies to come in and sponsor the event with, by getting a box with their logo and all that kind of stuff, right? And so then then Spookstock takes all these marketing dollars and they convert them into benevolent dollars, because then Spookstock gives away its profits to a bunch of different things. So I volunteered for them. And the founder, it's a very small organization, just like ours. They only got a handful of folks, but the founder wanted to run this. I forget what he used to call it. I think he called it something goofy, like it was like CQC or something like that. He was like close quarters combat. I'm like, yeah, that's not what anybody calls it. Yeah. And I said, him and I met at an event, like a cookout networking type event. And we hit it off and we were talking. He was telling me all about Spookstock. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. My wife and I would love to go. We love to support things like that, whatever. And so I figured that would be the end of it. We would just go, we would go to the concert. And then he reached out to me about a month later and he said, listen, I've been trying to do this close quarters combat thing. And, I think it'd be a really good way to get donors. And he told me what his idea was. And, he was doing what you would think someone like that would do. He's like contracting with someone who's going to run it all. And he just wanted me to help bring special operations guys in. And I said, okay. I said, yeah, I'm sure I could get volunteers. I was like, what would they be doing? And he said, oh, well, I thought they could be like OPFOR. And I was like, listen, man, not for nothing. I said, but I could find you a bunch of Green Berets who'll shoot CEOs in the face all day long and have a great time. I said, but I don't think that will endear them to your cause. I said, so why don't we try this instead? Why don't we have the special operators be like advisors to these guys, and they can get, and he was like, oh, that'd be great. So anyway, so that's what we did in the first one. And the first one that I did with them was, like I said, it was contracted to somebody else. And so we just kind of inherited whatever their plan was. And I took a look at it. I said, oh, well, why don't we try adding this? I want to try adding this. And so it was great. It went fine. But after that, I said, listen, we could do this the right way. I said, I'm happy to do it. I'll do it as a volunteer, and I'll run this whole thing for you, and it'll be fun. And we could, I think you could probably raise some money. And so that's what we started doing. So we started running this special operations experience for Spookstock. We did it a handful of times. And like I said, their board got panicky. They were looking at risk, and I was flying guys in helicopters and explosives. I'll explain the whole thing here in a second. And so that, they panicked, but you and I know, you know what I mean? I got Larry Hawks running the demo range. I got, Jay Pope I could name all these characters that right? Mm-hmm. And they're all consummate professionals. Like literally you are at far greater risk on a ski weekend in Vail by yourself than going through this experience. But it feels very dangerous, right? Because of all the things you're doing. But anyway, neither here nor there. They decided to get out of the special operations business. They didn't want to do it anymore. I said, okay, no problem. I said, we'll definitely take that over in Donovan and Bank. So when we stood up Donovan and Bank, that was like one of the first things we did was the special operations experience. So the way it basically works is we have 32 we'll call them participants, right? So that's the potential donors. They generally will pay, although it's a donation, they'll pay 10 grand just to be there, right? Because this stuff's expensive, explosives, helicopters, that stuff, yeah, it adds up, right? Because again, just like with Janice, I don't do anything on federal property. I don't use any federal resources. So it's not like we're using, range 37 out of Fort Bragg.
Right.
And then, I've planned this thing. I got 32 people showing up. And then, a platoon of the 82nd bumps me out because they're deploying. That could happen, right? Plus, all the things that we do, I would have to get insane levels of approval to do it, right? So, and I know how to do that stuff. Like I can get a 3-star signature, but that's 6 months of my life I've got to invest just to get approval to put somebody on a helicopter. So anyway, we do it all on private. It's expensive. So we do invite some folks as complimentary guests, right? Because they bring value to the community in other ways. So we invited this Dr. Eugene Lipoff, who does a lot of work in PTS. We invited him. We didn't ask him to make a donation, stuff like that. But generally, people will make a sizable donation to be there. And then we ask them for a donation above and beyond that at the end of the training. But anyway, so we have 32 people. They all show up on Friday afternoon. We kind of in-process them. I give them a little speech about why we're here. We do a lot of, they show up. They meet with their advisor. They go to dinner with their advisor. And then we go into, I give them an in-processing brief, safety brief. It's really quick. It's not like the stuff we're used to. It's to the point. It's engaging. And then we show them a video about, why we're here. And that's a pretty emotional video. And it gets everybody's head into the game, right? And then we take them down and to this one building, and they'll do like pretty much all Friday evening, they'll do weapons training. So they do pistol and rifle, but it's all sims. They're doing all indoor sims at that point. Okay. And then we put them to bed. Actually, we bring them back and they got to build bundles. So I make them build bundles because that's how they're getting their lunch the next day, right? So they got to build these MRE bundles, which always explode, which is part of the appeal, right?
Yeah.
So they build these MRE bundles, then they go to bed. And then we wake them up in the morning. They have breakfast with their advisor. And then we do an hour of CQB instruction. And then we do an hour of walkthroughs. So each team will go and they'll practice CQB. And then we break them up into, we take each 4-person team and we break them up into 8 different lanes, and it's like a shotgun round robin start, right? And so they go through all these training lanes. So they'll go through a hostage rescue lane. That's where they fly in on a OH-6. They rescue a hostage, and then they exfil in high-speed vehicles driven by retired state cops who look like your little old neighbor, and they're lunatics. So they do that. And then they'll do a demo range where they're actually building demolition charges and blowing doors and going into the room. They'll do a flat range where they're doing live fire, 5.56 and 9mm, so rifles and pistols. They'll do a machine gun range, so they're shooting 240s and 249s. They'll do a rappel lane, so they're rappelling from a three-story tower. They do a canine lane because they can put the bite suit on and they learn about military working dogs. There's a hand-to-hand lane where they do combatives. We got a UFC guy in there, Ryan Hall, and a couple of third group ASC guys in there, combatives, special operations combatives program level 1 trainers. So they'll do that. And then they do these CQB lanes. And so they'll do 3 CQB lanes, which they vary in complexity. So one is a simple lane. Everybody in that building's an enemy. You can shoot anybody, right? So it's all sims. It's live sim, force on force. So there's usually 3 retired Green Berets. That's usually where I put the old guys. Usually 3 retired Green Berets in there acting as Op 4, right? Then there's a complex lane where they go in and there's some casualties. And so an 18 Delta will show them how to treat, how to apply a tourniquet. And then there's an HVT lane where the weeks prior, they've been getting these intel updates about all the factions that they're going to face and all this kind of stuff. And it tells a story about their HVT. And that's usually one of the guys that I get to volunteer will be the HVT. And then they'll go in and they'll do that HVT lane. And on that one, the advisor will show them how a shotgun breach works. So there's a shotgun breach. They go in there and they try to kill or capture the HVT. So they're doing this. That's their entire day, right? And as you can imagine, getting all that done in one day is pretty intense. Absolutely. Right? So we're moving them every 45 minutes. They're doing stuff. And at the end of the day, we bring them back up to the main building and everybody stays there. And once you're there, you're there. So bring them up to the main building. I do a quick Gold Star ceremony. We raise the Gold Star flag. It's not too dissimilar from the flag raising at SEER, in so much as it's very emotional for these folks. So then I got them emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, physically wasted, and that's when we ask for a donation, right? So we do an appeal, and then we break everything down, and then we have our big beer and barbecue get together, fire pit, and that's when everybody really connects and gets to learn who everybody was. They get to talk to the instructor, all that kind of stuff. And then Sunday morning's breakfast, and then they're out of there. Although occasionally what we'll do is on Sunday morning, after all the patrons leave, we'll have a jujitsu. Usually we'll invite one or two like heavy hitters in the jujitsu world. Like in the May event, we had Hollis and Hobson Gracie there. They went through the experience, and then they stayed on Sunday to do a jujitsu seminar. So on this one in October, the next one in October, Chris Howder, who's another, really world-renowned jiu-jitsu master, he's going to run it. He'll go through the entire experience, and then on Sunday he'll run a seminar for us. So we try to, because Stu, who's a black belt in jiu-jitsu and runs our wellness program, the wellness program used to be about, just getting guys treatment, this treatment called the stellate ganglion block. But Stu's expanded that to include all different kinds of elements of wellness. And we have a huge component of like helping guys get access to jiu-jitsu if they want to try that because of all of those benefits. So we have partnerships with jiu-jitsu academies across the nation who will let D&B guys, start and try there for free and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so that's we'll usually do that on Sunday, and we do that experience twice a year. Dude, it's a blast, man. We have so much fun. You should come out to it. You should be a volunteer and be, one of the op four. Because I'm telling you, you see a bunch of guys that you do all the fun stuff we love to do with none of the bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have any risk assessments. I have waivers. Sign the waiver and we're off. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not worried. You know what I mean? So none of that stuff. But yeah, it's great. I mean, we do that twice a year, and then we do something called like a Special Operations Experience Light. And that's when we take a couple of instructors to groups of people who, they want to do something, but we can't do it at the level that we do it, because we do the Special Operations Experience in Montrose, Virginia, at a training facility called O'Gara Training Services. They have everything I need there from soup to nuts, totally turnkey. But I can't go down. We did a Special Operations Experience Light in Miami, in downtown Miami. I can't blow shit up. I mean, I could blow shit up in downtown Miami, but
once,
but you know what I'm saying? So we did all we did there was a little bit of CQB with a group from the YPO, the Young Presidents Organization. So we'll kind of take the mountain to Muhammad as well. And we do like we're doing one down in Dallas in September. And we're just going to be going to this guy's gun club with a bunch of his, friends who are all going to make it, it's fundraisers, right? So they're all going to make a donation, but we do a little of those kind of boutique events too. And then in the future, we want people who've gone through the Special Operations Experience to have access to more in-depth personalized experience. So maybe a 4-day SEER experience, or, a counter surveillance, all that kind of, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, really cool. Because you and I could sit down and come up with 1,000 ideas for fun training shit. That's nothing, it's just a matter of, and I'll tell you too, I used to think when I first started doing this stuff, I was like, oh man, we could have them do that, but they're going to think that's stupid. It's so lame. And then I found out, I was like, no, the bar is really, really low. Like, people don't do this shit at all. Like, I've had people with their hands shaken holding a sim pistol because they just don't do that stuff, So that's the Special Operations Experience. It's a blast, man. It's really, in terms of fundraising, it's pretty good. We do okay on fundraising, but it costs a lot to put it on. So, the P&L on that is not great. We do other fundraisers that take no energy, no resources, and the ROI. We have our board of advisors, and they'll host individual events at their homes, and they'll invite their network of friends. That takes no energy on our part. We show up, I flap my gun for 15 minutes, and we walk away with $80 grand. You know what I mean? The ROI on those are amazing. The ROI on the SOE is not as good, but it's so much fun, and programmatically it's really helpful because we always have new guys there. There's always a group. There's always a core group because they know exactly what to do, and then we have a group of new guys that always get to try it out and meet folks and reconnect. So it's still a totally worthwhile program because we don't lose money on it. We always make a little money for the foundation, which is great. The idea is to make more from that, but that's okay. It's not we do just fine with that, but it's not our big ROI. So it's more programmatic than it is fundraising.
Yeah, but honestly, I think that the intangibles there are severely important too, and that's connection of the civilian populace, especially the people in positions of power, to see what it is to be a special operator for a day. I think that's hugely important. you can watch all the movies you want and all the Hollywood bluster and stuff that comes along with it. And really, you're giving them the high points of all this. You know that. You're giving them the best part.
It's not training, right? It's an experience.
Right.
It's not training. And I tell folks, look, you could Google special operations experience, and I guarantee you can find something where a bunch of SEALs are going to yell at you and kick you around in the sand and tell you how to be more of a man because you suck. Okay, fine. But our goal when we have people at that experience is essentially, there's essentially really three things. One, we want them to stand shoulder to shoulder with the best in the world. Like you are there with them doing everything together, right? Two, you walk away with an appreciation for what it really takes to be in special operations. And three, you understand the cost of preserving our way of life. Like that's what we want them to walk away with. And also, we want them to accomplish something. What Green Berets are really good at. So again, I'm not trying to kick the SEALs, but I mean, I am. But SEALs are really good at showing you how proficient they are at something. So they'll demonstrate stuff and showing their expertise. What Green Berets are really good at is showing their expertise, but also helping you appreciate that you could probably do this too, right? So we're really good at helping people like achieve and succeed and accomplish something. And so when people go through the special operations experience, they do things. They don't have to. They can always take a knee, but we really work on pushing their limits and getting them to step outside their comfort zone. Because once they do that, that's an accomplishment they'll have with them for the rest of their life. And I will tell you, we had, there was a guy, most people don't know who he is, a guy by the name of Alan Eustace. Alan was an original engineer at Google. He was on the ground floor of Google, if that tells you what his wherewithal is and his place in society, right? He's done very well for himself, but he's an engineer by trade. Now, most people remember that maybe 10 years ago, the world record for free fall was set by a guy by the name of Felix Baumgartner. I think it was Felix, definitely Baumgartner, and he was sponsored by Red Bull. Like everybody remembers that, right? Do you remember that?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So everybody remembers that. What most people don't know is that several years after that, this guy Alan Eustace broke that record, and he broke it just paying out of his own pocket. He funded the entire initiative, but he thought it was an interesting engineer challenge, and so Alan Eustace actually holds the record for highest free fall. He was in this suit with explosive bolts. It was insane. And he came to the special operations experience. I'm like, oh man, what could I possibly do to impress this guy? He's going to think all of this is nothing. And I'm telling you, Sean, he came up to me at the end. He was like, this was one of the most amazing days of my life. I'm not making that up. That was a direct quote. And the reason was not because of the activities, but because of the people that he was surrounded with, right? Who are just remarkable, humble, servant leaders, all of that stuff that we know these guys are. And so that's why I think our special operations experience is kind of a gold standard, because it's none of the, it's got all the right intentions behind it. It's got all the right people involved in it. And it's about those objectives as opposed to, like I said, some of this nonsense that's out there where it's just like, regain your manhood or, all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I just think that stuff's kind of goofy, but yeah, so it's so far so good, man. It's a lot of fun. It's just, and you know what it's like? It's like a deployment. It's like a deployment with none of the crap and none of the, I'm getting to come home in a couple of days because you're getting together with the guys, you're packing all the stuff. You know what I mean? You get there, you set up the OPSEN, like literally, it's like all that kind of stuff. So it's, again, it's all the things that like we long for, we think we're nostalgic for, we miss, but we'd never do it again because the cost is too high. But you get a little taste of it. You get to do a little bit of the stuff that yeah. So it's fun.
The good stuff without the 9 months of suck that goes along with it.
100%. Yeah. You know what I mean? I get to come, I'm home on Monday. I come home on Monday and, I'm like, oh, how was everything this weekend? My wife was like, were you gone? She's like, were you at the grocery store? I'm like, no, I've been gone for like 5 days. And she's like, oh, okay, whatever. You know what I mean? It's like it's totally different. It's not like, the stuff that we had to suffer with before where you go and do that stuff. And oh, by the way, I'm not worried about anybody not coming back. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's not part of the equation either.
Man, that sounds really cool. And in fact, I think couple of our local guys here, real estate agents, did probably the last special operations experience. Kevin Crawford, I don't know if you recognize his name or not. I think he went out to, say it was with you guys. I don't know. Nothing but good to say about
Name
it.
doesn't ring a bell, so maybe not. But
They do a lot of work for the Charitable Trust, Special Forces Charitable Trust down here in San Antonio. He's a big advocate for those guys.
oh yeah. We have a great relationship with the SFCT. They support us, and and we support them.
And that's another thing. I dabble in that world myself. I'm on the board of Special Operations Solutions Fund, and our charter is basically immediate needs of SOCOM personnel, and so our targeted response time is 2 hours or less to need from a vetted SOCOM resource, and we consider our commander a vetted SOCOM resource. And so,
What's that called?
A Special Operations Solutions Fund. We're fairly new. We've only been around about 18 months or so, but our charter exists, like I said, to support immediate needs. There's other people who do things like you guys do and Patriot Hunts and whatever. Ours is, mama needs an airplane ticket to go to DC to visit her loved one who's wherever. Or, we all kinds of I call it small ball, but you know what? Base hits win the ball game, buddy.
Yeah, heck yeah. No, that's awesome. That's awesome.
And so, that's another little facet of my world I don't talk too much about. But honestly, I think it's one of those fulfilling things when we get a report through, hey, here's the support we provided, or you get that thank you note, right? It's like, this made all the difference in the world to me at this time in my life. That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. So I'm willing to bet. So I know, again, we're on we have a very good relationship with SF Charitable Trust. HB Gillum, their head of development. I know HB really well. We were in the Guard 1,000 years ago. We were both in 19th Group. He was the 3 when I was a team leader in 19th Group. And Jody Burns, the executive director. And probably what that guy went to was their, I forget what they call it, but they bring them all out to McCall.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And so, and so they get to go like walk the Nasty Nick or whatever, and maybe do some of the obstacles, and they do some other stuff, but they're not doing the hands-on shit
like
that
cool
we do. Yeah, at our stuff. You know what I mean? Like, you're building the demo, you're building the charge, the flex linear charge yourself, and in placing it and initiating it. You know what I mean? Among other things. But yeah, I guarantee you that if it's SF Charitable Trust, that's probably the thing they do out of McCall, which is still, good for them, because it doesn't cost them anything to do it. They use all volunteer manpower. It just makes me panicky that we'll get superseded by some other priority, or like I said, I can't do the things that I like to do. Because we like people to get, in my experience, you got to let them do the stuff,
Right.
You got to let them touch it themselves, touch the magic, and get a chance to do it. That's a whole different ballgame.
And I think, when speaking about the charitable world, there's a lot of people out there who are pretty rice bowly because you compete, so to speak, for the same donations, et cetera. We're not that way. I would love it if we would all lock shields and just push together. But
yeah, we're really working hard, organizationally. So there are other transition focused organizations out there, really good ones. The Honor Foundation, the Commit Foundation,
right.
4Block, Bunker Labs, all these things. We partner with all of them. And basically what we do is we start people off on the transition pathway with Janus 101 2 years out. And our goal is to help make their transition journey as efficient as possible. So the idea is in Janus 101, we go over all these other organizations. This is what they do. This is what it's best for. And so that people can be efficient in their pursuit, right? So if you want to go into corporate America, probably the Honor Foundation is good for you. If you want to build furniture in your garage and sell it on Etsy, well, the Honor Foundation is not a good path. You should probably go to Bunker Labs. So we try to help them. And in doing that, we've become probably the biggest referrers to these other organizations than anybody else combined. So more people go to THF because we recommend that they should go there, and all these other ones as well. And in that way, we eliminate that competition, right? But I will tell you, when organizations get weird is when they're worried about losing donor dollars. And here's my philosophy. If you're not inspired to give to us, then take your inspiration somewhere else and do good with it. That's okay. Like if I perceive, if I meet someone who has a lot of means and I perceive that their heart is really into whatever it is, feeding the whole, kids in education, I'd be like, oh, I know someone who does that and this is their charity and you should go talk to them, rather than try to figure out how to shave your squareness into my round, into my round hole. You're way better off letting that go. Just let it go. It will come back to you. It will 100% come back to you, And so, yeah, the whole, the whole idea of like protecting your donor base, I understand it, and I think it's also a trapping of growth. So some organizations, when they get big, look, they have got to be hyper focused on raising money because now they got a lot of overhead and a lot of bills to pay. We don't have that. Two things. One, we're really small by design. Like it's our full-time actual employees, W-2 employees, are me, Drew, and Stu. That's it. Everything else we kind of contract when we need it, but otherwise it's that, or a handful of volunteers for some of our. But most of the stuff we just do ourselves, because we can have the impact that we need to have with this small group of folks. But what that gives you is, we can be highly responsive, we can be super agile. I don't have to wait for a big board to tell me that it's okay to spend $3,000 to help this family get an autism support dog. You know what I mean? I don't need any of that shit. We just do what we think is right, Right. So by staying small like that, we have to raise money, we have to pay the bills, but I don't, I don't have to be like hyper fixated on it to the degree that, it takes us away from our mission, So that's one of the benefits of staying small. And then the other thing I would tell you too is, and I might be wrong about this, but I don't think I am. We are the only Special Forces benevolent organization that still is only run by Special Forces people. I don't think there's any other soft benevolent organization that can make that claim. I know there isn't. For better or worse, maybe we're a shit show as a result. We don't have the right level of nonprofit expertise or something, but we're doing okay. I would rather because I feel it's like super important for us to be able to connect to our constituents. Like that's why we have credibility at these things that we do, because it's us and we're talking to them. You know what I mean? Like I can go into a room and I can talk to a bunch of retiring Green Berets in ways that other people can't. And we have the credibility to do it, and the feedback shows that's the case. So staying really small, I think is really important. And not to ramble on too much, but we chose the name Donovan and Bank very specifically for a couple of reasons. One, for folks who don't know, William Donovan founded the Office of Strategic Services in World War II, which was kind of the forerunner to the CIA and Special Forces. And Aaron Bank was a Jedburgh in the OSS, in the Office of Strategic Services. And Aaron Bank went on to create the Green Berets. So you got those two guys kind of tied to our lineage, right? Donovan and Bank. So it ties to us historically, but it's benign and, by design. Like I'm on the chairman of the board of an organization called Erase PTSD Now. There's no question what those guys do. That's it. Like that's it. There's no question. Right. But it also means that's all they do. Right. Mm-hmm. For us, you can't look at us and be like, oh, those guys are in transition. Those guys help. You can't tell. You know what I mean? We're not the Soft Transition Institute or any bullshit like that. But so we have that as a somewhat of a liability, but also that gives me the freedom to do a lot. Like we're not bound by certain things. Anything that we see that we think will lead to an individual's peace, contentment, and balance, because our mission statement, if I didn't say it earlier, our mission statement is to help special operators bring closure to their warrior story and transition to a life of peace, contentment, and balance. Anything we see that will help people achieve that, we can do, right? So that gives us, so we have the tie to our lineage. We have the freedom to be, flexible because we're not branded to a specific task. And then the third thing is when Donovan stood up the OSS, he sought people who were capable of calculated recklessness with disciplined daring. And that's how we run this organization. Like, guess what I don't have? I don't have a fucking lawyer. We don't have one, and I'm not gonna. Because you can't convince me I need one. Because all they're going to do is tell me no. And look, if we make a mistake, it'll be an honest mistake. If we break the law somehow, it'll be honest. It'll be righteous, and we can just fix it. I'm not worried about that. I'm certainly not worried about Drew and Stu doing something inappropriate. The biggest threat is me. Of all the people, it's probably me, right? So I'm not worried about those guys. Like, we have, because we're so small and it's a family. I mean, it's literally a family. You know what I mean? Like, so anyway, yeah. So, I mean, I think I started on this tangent because we were talking about people and their rice bowls and protecting. I see that some, but it's generally because they're worried about, their donor base. And if we have a problem, I generally try to reach out. I reach out to like the handful of people, the GBF, the SF Charitable Trust. Oh, you got the same problem I do. That's why I came upstairs. I get the same problem. The SF Charitable Trust, Task Force DAG, or I'll reach out to SFF, the Special Forces Foundation. I'll reach out and be like, hey, we have a problem. Who wants to contribute? You know what I mean? And generally that works out pretty good. So I'm trying to look, you're never going to get everybody who comes into this space is like, oh, we got to figure out a way to, to combine all of our forces into one thing. Like the SEAL, the SEAL Foundation, they got $111 million endowment and they're super powerful. I'm like, yeah, but you got to remember, because I thought long and hard about this. I was like, man, we're going to start the Donovan and Bank Foundation. We're going to be one more. Mm-hmm. But here's why I rationalized it maybe to myself. I realized the reason that we're that way, the reason that we're dispersed like that, it's emblematic of our culture. That's how we operate. We operate dispersed in small teams all over the place. That's kind of how we roll. So I was like, oh, that makes sense that our nonprofit ecosystem would kind of look the same, and that's okay, as long as, like you said, we're not creating unhealthy or unnecessary competition. And again, if somebody steals a donor from me, you didn't steal a donor from me. They were just more inspired to go to you. So great. That means they're going to give more power to you. I'll find somebody else. And
honestly, I think that is the exact right attitude to have. We're stronger together. We don't have to be, side by side pushing like, the larger organization. Once you turn into a battleship, man, you can't turn a battleship.
Oh no.
But you can turn a speedboat.
And so, no, I'm telling you, I know a lot of organizations, and that's the thing. We have a really small board. One of the beauties of incorporating a nonprofit in North Carolina, you only have to have one member on your board of directors. Now we have 3 because, we want to have at least some capability. But it's not this big onerous board that I have to go and check with for every little thing. They're small, responsive, super adaptive, whatever, you know what I mean? And they're fully supportive of what we do. Now, technically by law, they could vote me out 100%. It's probably not going to happen. I put the right guys on the board. I know what I'm doing. It's not my first day, but you know what I mean? Like technically they have that authority, you know what I mean? They could vote to change the organization. They could do that kind of thing. But right now what they're doing is just providing us the ethical and legal oversight that we need. And, and they know we're experts at this. You know what I mean? I mean, we've been doing this for a while, and we've gotten pretty good at it. I have a board of advisors, but that board of advisors is not a governing body. They're a fundraising body. So everybody on the board of advisors is required to either donate or raise $25,000 a year. They have to come to the special operations experience at least once a year. They bring one other person to the special operations at least once a year, and once every 3 years. So this is the goal. They have to run a private event at their home or their club or whatever. That's what we just did out in California. And that was one of our board of advisors. He hosted a wine and cheese reception or something, whatever. And we got up, we talked about what we do. And then everybody there knows they're there because it's a fundraiser. They got it, they can't leave without leaving a check. So the board of advisors is responsible for having one of those. So they got to do like 3 a year. So right now the board of advisors is 9. It used to be 10. Someone had to step out because they didn't have enough time, but they're still helping us. So that, that's the other requirement for the board of advisors, but they don't vote on anything. They'll give us advice and all this other kind of stuff, but they don't, they don't have any authority when it comes to the organization. So that's kind of how we structured that. And I tell other, aspiring nonprofits that was a game changer for us, and they should consider that when they're,
I'm taking notes. Trust me.
Yeah, no, a lot of nonprofits create boards of advisors who are giving them advice. It's like, okay, that's cool, but do you really need that much advice? What you need is help fundraising, because look, those kind of folks, they can talk to their friends in ways, just like I can talk to soft people in ways that others can't. They can talk to their peers in ways I can't. They can go to their buddy and be like, hey, listen, I know, just write them a check for 10 grand. You know what I mean? Like if you and I were men of substantial means, we could talk to each other very plainly. I'd be like, Sean, write these guys a check. You know what I mean? It'd be no big deal. Right. So having that capability has been kind of a game changer for us,
I think that's
yeah. So we're like I said, we're lucky. We've been lucky. We're lucky because we got a lot of support. We're lucky because every day we get up is a day we get to help somebody. We're lucky because, we fell ass backwards into this knowledge and, the timing was right.
Right.
So you know the deal. Luck and timing, man. That's just about everything.
Yeah, but it was a carpe diem moment for you, right? You saw it, you seized it, and you drove it down. You drove the football down the field, and you
Yeah,
scored.
Yeah,
I mean, that's all. Pick your damn euphemism or whatever you want to call it. They're cliche, but
yeah.
I think honestly, that's few people are able to do that, and congratulations to you guys for doing that. We got about 15 minutes left, so I want to make sure we hit on your innovative wellness program. Tell me what Stu is up to and what's the basis for that and how do you...
So the way the Innovative Wellness Program started was we started to notice before Stu came on board. So he retired on December 31st and came on board with us in January of this year. And we have been talking all along about him coming on board. And but long before that, Drew and I started noticing that a lot of guys were dealing with the physiological and psychological wear and tear of 20 plus years in special operations. And look, a huge part of our message, just like we were talking about earlier, is about positivity. It's not feeding into this very negative, woe is me, veteran as a victim, like, where society has turned from thank you for your service to thank you for your service and I'm sorry about your PTSD. It's like, no, look, man, people struggle for sure, but most of us are doing really well. And so we try to, one of the big things we tell people is not buying into that, into that negativity, because it's going to be really easy for them to do that as a veteran because it's everywhere, right? But anyway, so we saw, folks kind of struggling with that stuff. And about the same time, I learned through another project that I was involved in, I learned about something called the stellate ganglion block, the SGB. And, you're nodding, so I'm guessing you're familiar with it, but a lot of folks aren't, right? And so essentially, what the SGB, well, let me talk about the symptoms first. So we were meeting, a lot of folks in our community deal with things like anxiety, hair trigger, irritability, insomnia is a huge one, sexual dysfunction, and the system, when it sees those symptoms, all the system knows is PTSD. So they get told, oh, you have PTSD. And the reality is for most of our guys, they actually have operator syndrome. And operator syndrome, for folks who don't know, is an overstimulated sympathetic nervous system. In other words, your flight or fight mechanism, when it's exposed to chronic stress or acute stress, gets stuck in overdrive. So normally when you're in the woods walking down a path and a snake crosses your path, of course, we're all full of shit. We say we eat it. That's not true. We all jump back, right? We jump back. We're like, holy shit. You jump back. And then your heart races. You sweat a little. Your eyes become more focused. Your ears become more in tune. That's flight or fight, right? It's kicking in. That's your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system protecting you in a way that you can't do cognitively. It's millions of years of evolution helping to keep you alive, right? It helps you react quicker than your brain can react. And so normally what will happen is you experience that, and then 30 minutes later or so, everything just kind of comes back down to baseline. You come back down to normal. So what's happening is blood flows to the amygdala, where the flight or fight mechanism resides, to activate it, and then it all kind of, for lack of a better way to put it, all kind of drains out, right? So there isn't an abnormal blood flow in the amygdala. So what happens for our community is that when you're exposed to chronic or acute stress, so, back-to-back 6-month deployments, or just ongoing operational tempo that's way beyond, burning the candle at both ends, or you have acute stress, you accidentally kill a woman or a child in combat, or your best friend gets killed next to you. What'll happen is that flight or fight mechanism activates, but it gets stuck. And so an individual will be, the way it feels, the way it looks is like you'll be in your kitchen making a sandwich, and you logically, cognitively know there's no threat there, no problem at all, right? But you open that one cabinet and all the Tupperware spills out, and you get just pissed. You get enraged over the Tupperware spilling, right? That's because your flight or fight mechanism is still going, because it's not normal to get angry at spilling Tupperware, right? So that's kind of what it looks like. There are many other examples, but that a lot of people can kind of identify with that. So what that is an indicator of is you have this overstimulated sympathetic nervous system, and unfortunately, the system, if you go to get it addressed, the system's just gonna label you with PTSD, and then they're gonna go down that path of treating you with, SSIs and all this other kind of stuff, right? Well, it turns out. So the good news is, it turns out that there's a nerve mass on either side of your neck called the stellate ganglion nerve mass, and it's connected directly to the amygdala. And if you inject a small amount of anesthesia into that nerve mass, it resets the amygdala to pre-trauma state, right? To pre-stress state. So it gives guys like this huge relief and breather and leg room. Now, it's not a magic bullet. Like if you go back to like a big problem for our guys is all that stress that we experience is exacerbated by organizational and cultural behavior. So, half a dozen energy drinks in a day, dipping, then, you're all jacked up at night. So you drink to help you go to sleep, all these things, right? Eating shitty. So all those kind of things exacerbated. So there's a lot of behavior. So if you go and get the stellate ganglion block treatment, and then you go right back to those same behaviors, the amygdala is going to go back to where it was. So after that treatment, you have to have the appropriate aftercare and behavioral practices, whatever it is, meditation, yoga, journaling, jujitsu, riding horses, whatever the hell that thing is that helps you to get that, to maintain those sort of psychological gains. If you don't do that, it just won't last, right? So we partner with the two world leading experts in this procedure, the stellate ganglion block procedure. One is Dr. Eugene Lipoff. He's out of Chicago, Illinois. The other one is Dr. Sean Mulvaney and his partner Jim Lynch out of Annapolis, Maryland. It's funny, doctors and the medical profession, they've kind of written papers together, but there's a lot of like professional tension, between them, because there's a little bit of ego involved and who invented it first and whose method is better. And you know what I mean? They're very passionate about their method. And so they're very critical about each other's methods, but they're both really, really effective from our perspective. And so that was what we were doing. We were like, that was the Innovative Wellness Program. And I was doing it by myself, as both the executive director and trying to run this. And we were lucky because the Spookstock Foundation, who I mentioned earlier, for a long time was giving us kind of an open-ended grant where they were funding treatments. And they're still doing that. There's some conditions attached to it, some other things, but they're still helping us with that. But that was really what the Innovative Wellness Program was. It's like getting guys into treatment. Now, since Stu took over, he's become really, really, really good at being able to assess, what people's needs are and where they're actually, where their wellness gaps are. So instead of just everybody going to Chicago or everybody going to Annapolis for the SGB, he's like, well, you could try, listening to what you're telling me, you might be a good candidate for, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, or you might be a good candidate for, just straight talk therapy, which we have, avenues and access, to help people get that kind of stuff. Or, you might just need some more regularity to your PT that you're going to lose. So you can start practicing jujitsu. So you got all these capabilities now and all these resources. So very much like Janus was built, where we help people find these other resources. That's kind of what the Innovative Wellness Program has become, where, Stu will kind of assess where people are suffering, what their wellness gaps are, and then, kind of help them plug in. And then, under that umbrella too, we lean in when other organizations are trying to fund things for, like, substance abuse recovery, sending people to Warriors Heart, things like that. Like, we can contribute a little bit to that. We don't have the deep pockets that some of them do, but we definitely want to be part of the solution. So we, part of what we do through wellness is we'll fund various things, for those kind of things. I bet we've put to date, we probably put about 200 people through the protocols in Chicago or Annapolis. And I can tell you that's a problem with the SGB. There's not a lot of great empirical data. All these folks are always working on studies and trying to put better data and all this kind of stuff. But what I can tell you, Sean, is that I've had people. Well, I'll tell you this one story. I'll try to be concise because I know we're running out of time. So there was a guy, you may or may not know him. His name's Trevor Beeman. He was a third group guy. And he tells his story publicly as he's a public speaker. So this isn't like I'm revealing anything about him, but he was sexually assaulted from the time he was 8 until the time he was 16 by his stepdad. So got away from that situation, joined the Army to kind of regain his humanity and his manhood, and then went, he went to selection, became a Green Beret, did that for 20 years. So he was in such a bad place psychologically that what he used to tell me was that there was a horror movie playing in his head that he couldn't shut off. And the only way he could dampen it was with drugs and alcohol, or considering just shutting out the lights by killing himself. we took him to Chicago. I happened to be on that trip because we had a cohort of guys that went up there, and he walked out of that first day of treatment, and he was like grinning from ear to ear. And he said to me, he's like, hey man, he's like, that movie that was playing in my head, he's like, it's gone. And so we have people tell us all the time, hey, you know, this treatment gave my children their father back. This treatment gave my wife their husband back. And some, you know, they'll say, hey, this treatment saved my life. Like, that's not hyperbole. You know what I mean? Like guys say, it's not us, it's the treatment, right? So Innovative Wellness, we probably put about 200 people through that since we really started institutionalizing the program or codifying the program once Stu arrived. And but that's expensive too. You know, it costs about $5,000 to put people through that. So when we talk about running the Donovan and Bank Foundation, it costs us about $750,000 a year to run it. For a Green Beret, you're like, wow, that sounds like a lot of money. But you know the deal. That's nothing. You know what I mean? That's not a lot of money to have the impact that we have. Where our financial growth opportunities is really in treatment. So anything that the more money we raise, that's the more people we can treat. Once we've raised enough money to run the organization, which does include treatment as well. But that's kind of how we see our growth. We're not going to grow by many people, maybe one or two. We certainly don't need a shitload of money to run the organization, to have the impact we have. We're at every SF base twice a year, every one of them. Actually, JBLM, so that's Washington for folks who don't know. We're out there twice a year, 4 times a year, and of course at Bragg, we're doing stuff quarterly all the time. And so we have a really, really high impact for the amount of money that we need to do it. And anything we raise above that is really for expanding the treatment and treatment options. Right. But yeah, Innovative Wellness, man, it's a great program. It's helped a lot of people, and that's a place where it's like, when you got a guy breaking down in tears because you're giving him hope, that's a remarkable, gift to be able to be a part of.
Proof's in the pudding on that one, right? When people, it's like the first time I went diving, and the tinnitus went away for a little bit. It's like game changer, right? You get down.
Yeah. Have you done it?
Distalate ganglion? No.
Yeah.
They actually do it here locally in San Antonio. There's a couple different avenues to get the treatment, but again, it's one of those, you got to go find somebody kind of a things. You're not going to go to your VA rep and go, hey, I want to do the SGB, and they're like, what?
Yeah, some VAs do it. So some VAs actually do it, but it's inconsistent because each VA gets to decide for themselves. Right. SGB's been around for 100 years for pain management, but for this new, treatment, it's relatively cutting edge. But some VAs do it. I don't remember. I think I used to have a list of all the ones that were currently offering SGB. So it's not like they're not, but I get it. It's not the easiest thing in the world.
A lot of it falls in the experimental scientific research part of town here in San Antonio. I mean, San Antonio is the center of the medical universe, much like Fort Bragg is the special operations center of the universe. Yeah. And here down in San Antonio, there are so many military retirees from now every service. It used to be almost Air Force exclusive, along with some smattering of Army. That's changed. When they went to that.
Oh, really? There's a big population down there?
Oh my God, you can't believe it. The roughly 2.5 million people in San Antonio, I'd say over half of them, I would think, it seems like, are some way, shape, or form connected to the military, whether direct service or
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, literally, it's called Military City USA, and in fact, one of our brethren down here, 7th Group, is like the leading real estate salesman in San Antonio.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I won't mention his name here, but. Anybody who lives in San Antonio knows who he is. Phenomenal, and it's one of those success stories. Just like, look, I can figure this out. Got out, started his own real estate business, and just killing it. And now he's expanded all over the place with Keller Williams. Phenomenal guy. Does a lot of good for the community. In fact, he lost basically his entire team in an incident. He was a warrant officer. He's a retired warrant officer. Lost all of his team in Afghanistan. So he honors their memory, in his main business. There's a Harley sitting in there with, signatures on from Medal of Honor winners, the typical SF tribute, right?
The usual. Yeah.
I'll mention his name. Levi Rogers is his name. He's a phenomenal dude. Love him to death. Talk to him often down here in San Antonio, just doing good things. But, one of those success stories.
Yeah. Awesome.
And so let's see. It looks like we got about a minute left here before we're off air. But I want you to hang around for just a short bit, if you will. Afterwards, I got some things I want to talk to you about, Paul. Once again, for our audience out there watching, please go to donovanbankfoundation.org. Is that the right address?
It's donovanbank.org. Yep.
donovanbank.org.
If you just Google Donovan and Bank Foundation, it'll come up.
There you go. Have a look at what Paul and Stu and the rest of the guys are doing at Donovan Bank. If you're a special operator out there transitioning, please link up with these guys. They probably got resources or access to resources that you don't even know you need yet. So, please don't fall prey to the same old thing, and go check out DNB. Paul, thanks so much for being on with us today. We really appreciate your time. I look forward to having you back again, man.
Yeah, it's awesome. I appreciate it. It's great to catch up too. I mean, I just assumed you were face down in a puddle somewhere, but look at you. You're doing great.
Absolutely. So thanks again so much for being on, and we will definitely be in touch with you guys. I think we're coming on clear here.
Mark and I have both been in the infantry in the Army. I had been in the Marines prior to that. We both ended up in a unit called 1st Special Forces Group.
I was a sniper in the infantry, been a sniper in Special Forces, and did a full career in different types of teams: mountain team, air ops team, counterterrorism team. I met Curtis actually at Fort Lewis when he was running a sniper locker, and then we were on a team together in Okinawa. We've been friends, and we've always talked about going into business and life after the Army.
We got out, went to work in the civilian world, and realized a lot of what we did in the military translated to business. We looked at the cutlery industry, and the people there as a culture were fantastic. And we said, hey, we're going to start a knife company here in North Carolina.
In the beginning, we had a knife grinder, a blaster, some rudimentary tools. We started out and decided, what do we want to make? Well, let's make something we know. So it was a combat knife, and we did 3 models because we figured you got to have more than one when you start out.
You think you know everything about knife because you carried one all your life, but to be quite honest, we were new at it. We didn't know everything, so we took them to a lot of our Special Forces buddies at Fort Bragg. They gave us some advice and allowed us to develop those initial products. Today, we have a whole lot more offerings than we did in those early days. We actually have 3 distinct lines of knives we call gold, silver, and bronze. Gold being the knives we make right here in our shop in North Carolina. The silver line knives are those made for us by our partners up in Olean, New York at K-Bar. And our bronze line are knives we design using US-made steel that are manufactured overseas. A lot of folks think we have a giant manufacturing facility with 100 people. And quite honestly, we have 10 core people that we use to build our knives.
Making a knife isn't as simple as most people think. There are many processes that are involved, so we have checks and balances and continuous quality control throughout the processes. We know that perfection should not get in the way of getting your job done. So while we strive for perfection, we know we'll never achieve it.
I'll never forget the first time we won a Blade Show award because of the rest of the industry, the people who do what we do, saying, hey, you guys have this figured out. We realize quality, it's not just the time we put into making the knives. It's not just the high-end materials or processes or even the money we spend, our raw cost to make those knives. In the end, the quality is proven out by the people that hold them and use them, right? If someone's willing to pay for it, and they're willing to carry it, and they're happy to carry it, they might even brag about it. To us, that's the measure of quality. We don't chase trends. We don't put things on knives that don't need to be there. We always joke, and I know this sounds ultra simplistic, sharp, pointy, with a comfortable handle. You do those 3 things, you're probably going to be successful in knife making. And I think if you can take a look at a knife, it's very, very simple, but you can immediately say, I know who designed that, or I know who made it. To me, that's a measure of success. That's what we try to do here at Spartan Blades.
Both Curtis and I care about our country. We fought for it. We took our oath seriously and still do to this day. So since our product goes to end users who use it in the most ultimate fight, we take it seriously, what we make. That when it goes in a box and it gets sent to a customer, that it's ready to go wherever you need to go. And it's going to be there and perform. And that's what we strive for every day.